I haven't just woken up, I promise you. I'm wearing a dressing gown because in England it's like hella cold. Today's video is going to be about DC Comics. Some of you might really enjoy this video, or some of you may have looked at the title DC Comics and ran away and hid, and that's not a good thing. I'm making a video about DC Comics because I feel lately DC Comics has gotten a really bad rep, and that's really not cool because don't get me wrong, I love comics, I really do. I love Marvel comics and I love DC comics, and there's more comics other than that I love. Like, Marvel comics and DC comics are not the only comic books in the universe, but I'm not really going to go into that. Mainly though, when it comes down to it, people are always like, are you a Marvel comics fan or a DC comics fan? Now, these days, because obviously of the Avengers, I feel like Marvel comics has kind of taken the reigning crown of glory as the people's favourite comic book. DC Comics actually gets kind of a bad rep on the internet. I've lost count at how many times I have seen people bashing DC Comics on Twitter or Tumblr, and it's really upsetting because, honest to God, even though I do try to love Marvel Comics and DC Comics equally, if it came down to it, honestly and truly, I kind of prefer just a little bit. This is like a 49-51 ratio quota, but 51 has to go to DC Comics. I love DC Comics, but I feel DC Comics gets a bit of a bad rep because people feel like DC Comics superheroes are lame and uncool. A lot of people think that DC Comics supervillains are wacky and lame, and that DC Comics have kind of just given up trying to make good supervillains because some of the villains are just weird. And yeah, I guess I kind of could agree with you on that, but at the same time, DC Comics has made some really cool superheroes and supervillains alike, and no one ever gets that. I actually saw a tweet once where someone went, people only like DC Comics because of Batman, and it really kind of made me go, someone clearly has never read the comic books. I feel also the majority of DC comic book haters have never even read DC Comics, which again, don't even get me started on people who hate on superheroes yet have never read the comics. But anyway. Okay, so those of you might know that the Marvel Comics have got the Avengers, and they're like their league of superheroes, whereas you've got the Justice League in DC Comics. I, to a certain extent, actually prefer the Justice League to the Avengers, mainly because I feel the Avengers don't really have any rules. The Avengers are kind of free to, well, this is in the films, not maybe so much in the comic books, but on films and kind of film versions and TV adaptations of the Avengers are kind of free to do whatever they like. There's not many rules around them. They can kill as many people as they like, and honest to God, as far as rules are concerned, there's really none. Whereas DC Comics, with the Justice League, there are tons of rules. They're not allowed to kill anyone. There are tons of rules with them, and what I like about the fact is DC Comics, I feel, gave the Justice League tons of rules and regulations, because obviously a lot of superheroes are going to break these rules and regulations. With these rules and regulations, obviously some of these superheroes are going to break them, and that creates so much drama because you kind of see the dark side of your favourite superhero. It really adds to the drama because rules are kind of made to be broken, if you like. Yet with DC Comics, if you break the rules, there are serious consequences if you're not part of the big three. With the Avengers, I feel the Avengers are kind of more a unity. I don't really feel one Avenger is more popular than the other. I mean, obviously people are going to have favourites, but I don't feel that there's ever, a big three or whatever in the Avengers. Whereas in the Justice League, there's Batman, obviously, Superman and Wonder Woman. They're kind of the big three of the Justice League. They are untouchable. Whatever they do will never ever matter because they're the untouchable trio, if you like. And that gives injustices and it causes unfair. One of my favourite DC comic superheroes, who's really never ever featured in the movies, is a woman called Huntress. She is awesome. She's really badass and she doesn't give a shit about the rules, and she's just really cool. And She was in the Justice League and she broke one of the rules and got kicked out of the Justice League for trying to kill someone, whereas Superman and Batman have killed tons of people, yet you never see them get kicked out of the Justice League. It shows kind of the inequalities. It creates drama and it adds tension when you've got inequalities, I feel, in the Justice League. So, as a way of getting you to understand my appreciation of DC Comics, I'm going to tell you my favourite superheroes and supervillains. Now, I am going to warn you now, the majority of my favourite supervillains are going to be Batman supervillains, but only because I feel Batman supervillains have been just really awesome. So, I'm going to talk about them. Loads of people say, when you think of DC Comics, people think of Batman, Superman and Wonder Woman, and then they think that's it, and all other DC comic book heroes are just really, really crappy. And it's the same with villains. With Batman supervillains, with DC Comics supervillains, people only really think of the Joker. People really only think of the Joker and they think that's about it. The Joker was just a one-off, brilliant supervillain, and all the other supervillains are terrible, and they're really, really not. So I'm going to give you my top kind of DC Comics superheroes. Going on to my favourite Justice League superheroes. DC Comics has got a ton of famous superheroes. Talking about the big three, people really only know DC Comics for the big three. They don't really know any of the superheroes. I mean, I think a lot of people are vaguely aware that Flash is in it, but a lot of people don't seem to like, for example, Green Lantern is a bit of a laughing stock at the moment because his film was really unsuccessful. I mean, I didn't think it was that bad, but it wasn't very well critically acclaimed, so... I love Huntress. Huntress is one of my absolute favourite DC Comics superheroes. I just think she's awesome. She's just really badass. She doesn't give a shit about the rules, but Huntress, apart from maybe the cartoons, Huntress is never, ever, ever featured in the movies. Huntress has to be one of my favourite DC Comics superheroes, and also Huntress falls in love with Question. Question is a really intriguing character. He basically doesn't have a face, and I can't remember the entirety of why he doesn't have a face, but he doesn't have a face because it kind of adds to the mysteriousness of his character, and also he's the smartest man in the world, and it kind of gives him this rough, mysterious edge, the fact he's faceless. But I remember, spoiler alert, but he actually ends up dating Huntress, and Huntress is this really hot woman, and she actually jokes to him, you must be the ugliest man in the world if you had to cover your face, if you have to hide your face by having no face at all. And I remember I was watching actually the Justice League animated series, and there was a really touching scene actually where Question had been tortured, so he was in hospital and he had to, because he does actually have a face, he wears this kind of mould to make it look like he doesn't have a face, and he had to get the mould taken off, and when she took his mould off she saw his face for the first time, and it was a okay looking guy, but he was a really battered and bruised, and made him look a bit like a troll, like an orc actually, and he goes, you were right, I am the ugliest man in the world, and she says something along the line of, no you're not, and it's like, oh, I just love their relationship. I thought they were a really cute couple. Then there was stuff like Black Canary. My little sister's obsessed with Black Canary. Black Canary is a superhero who basically kills you with her voice. She's like Christine from the Phantom of the Opera, except not so damsel in distress-ish. She's just a really awesome superhero, and I like her. And her and basically Catwoman, Black Canary, and the Huntress then form a legion called the Birds of Prey, which is a really, really badass, like, superhero legion. Okay, next I'm going to go on to my favourite DC Comics villains. I will warn you, majority of this is going to be Batman supervillains, but I love Batman supervillains, so don't judge me. One of my favourite Batman supervillains has to be, I'm going to start it off with another woman, because I feel like I've gone on a nice kind of female empowerment crusade, so I'm going to start this off with another woman. Poison Ivy is one of my favourite just villains ever in anything. I think she is awesome. Poison Ivy is basically a super villain who's like obsessed with plants basically. She's like Peter, except, is it Peter or Peter? I never know how to pronounce it. Except with plants. She's like batshit insane about plants. She views plants like they're humans, and she calls people who destroys plants murderers. She basically creates a lot of toxins from her plants. What I loved about Poison Ivy was I used to watch Batman the animated series, and on Batman the animated series, and also in the comic books as well, she used to actually date Harvey Dent, and that was actually a running joke throughout Batman the animated series that she used to date Harvey Dent. Like, I remember there's a scene where she walks into this thug place and her and Harvey Dent are really cold towards each other, and then the Joker's like, what's up, what's with all this, coldness towards each other? And then she goes, we used to date. And I just thought that was really funny. But anyway, she used to date Harvey Dent, but then I think one of the main reasons why they hated each other was because she actually tries to kill Harvey Dent. Basically, she gives him the kiss of death, if you like. She gives him this really passionate kiss, and then Harvey Dent basically ends up really, really badly hospitalized. And it turns out that, and then Batman later works out that it was her kiss of death, and he mainly works this out because she then kisses him. And I just thought it was really, really awesome. Everyone kind of talks about the kiss of death like it's a metaphor. I don't think anyone's ever been literally given a kiss of death. So to see Poison Ivy turn this metaphor into like a real thing, I just thought was so badass. Okay, so my next favourite DC comic villain has to be the Riddler. And by the way, this is my list of DC comic. By the way, this list of villains is kind of villains that weren't featured in the movies. So if you don't see the Scarecrow or the Joker on here, or Two-Face, obviously it's because they're already awesome. Okay, so I love the Riddler because the Riddler was basically this supervillain who would give you riddles. He was basically this really, really smart man who was kind of, it's almost like, have you ever been in school and thought, I'm in a place full of idiots? That's what the Riddler was like. He was this really, really smart man who was never really appreciated for his genius and ended up becoming a kind of crazed villain as a result of it. He would riddle people, give people riddles, and his famous catchphrase was "riddle me this." And what I loved about the Riddler was that he never actually directly kills people. He would give them a riddle, and it's kind of like he gave them a chance to live. What I loved about the Riddler was that if you got a riddle wrong, that'd be it for you. You'd be dead. And the Riddler didn't do that. The Riddler didn't kill you. You could have lived by simply just getting the riddle right. So I feel the Riddler kind of plays on he's a very sadistic character because he kind of plays on humans blaming themselves for what's happened to them. Like, you did this to yourself. I gave you an opportunity to live, and you answered incorrectly, and it's your stupidity that's landed you here. And I think that's really, really haunting prospect. So this was kind of giving light to a lot of DC comic book heroes and villains that don't really get a lot of light, because seriously, a lot of them are really, really cool. Everyone likes the Jokers, you've got to admit it. Even if you don't like Batman, you've got to admit everyone likes the Jokers. And Harley Quinn, oh my god, Harley Quinn doesn't actually get a lot of publicity, so I'm going to talk about Harley Quinn really quickly. Harley Quinn is basically the Joker's girlfriend. She's called Harley Quinn as a play on words from the Harlequins. Harley Quinn speaks in a really kind of strong Bronx accent, and Harley Quinn almost brings the good in the Joker. Harley Quinn is, to a certain extent, besotted with the Joker, but she's also her own woman. I mean, she does actually team up an alliance with Poison Ivy. She becomes quite good friends with Poison Ivy. And I just think Harley Quinn's a great woman. She almost has control over the Joker sometimes. Like, she wears the trousers in the relationship. I just love Harley Quinn. I love her kind of innocent attitude. And also, Harley Quinn is actually really clever. She used to be a psychiatrist before she fell in love with the Joker. Nina, go away.
Tomorrow.
My little sister interrupted me.